If you heard a pop song in the last 2 decades, odds are you've been witness to the work of our guest this week. Kuk Harrell is the vocal producer in the music business. He's won 5 Grammy Awards and has worked with nearly every superstar making music today. That includes Rihanna, Beyonce, Shakira, Justin Bieber, and Jennifer Lopez, just to name a few. We got the chance to sit down with Kuk and learn how he became the go-to vocal producer in the music industry. His journey took him all over the country and through several different industries. He joins us to tell that story on this episode of The Big Break.
Well, I grew up in Chicago, Illinois. I was born in Chicago proper, and like 4th grade or so, moved out to the south suburbs in Calumet City. Definitely grew up there. And my introduction to music was through my mom and her 2 sisters. So my mom and her 2 sisters were background singers in Chicago. And this was back in the day when Chicago was like the hub for advertising. So like they were the first call background singers on a whole bunch of sessions for, McDonald's, Pepsi, Coke, Kraft, just to name a few. So I would always be with my aunt and be with my mom, go in the studio with them. And, my whole family is musical. So it's like, my aunt and my mom, they sang, played instruments, and were always, as me and my cousins were growing up, we just watched them do what they did. And, once, fortunately, early in life, I realized that I had a musical gift, and that was, I could sing at an early age, but my first instrument was guitar. Then I realized that, I played guitar for years, and I realized I wanted to try drums, and I realized I had the talent to play drums. But it was really cool. I had a great transition thing, because as I got older, I realized like, wait a second, I'm good, but I'm not that good. I was really fortunate that I just had the mindset to be honest with myself and go, well, wait a second, I'm good, but I'm not as good as that dude, like Neil Peart or Phil Collins, great drummers. And at that point, this was when I came to that realization. That's when, producers started being the big thing. Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, L.A. Babyface. But way before that, Quincy Jones. And, around the same time with Quincy Jones, early on, was a guy named Charles Stepney, who was responsible for getting me and my whole family in the track of being in the music industry. Early on, he was a songwriter, arranger, record producer, and he produced records for projects like the Rotary Connection. Then he did a whole bunch of radio and TV commercials, and that's who my mom and her sisters worked for, as well as him producing like Earth, Wind and Fire. So when, as a kid, seeing this guy do this production thing, that really ignited a fire in me and my cousins, to just follow that path.
So he was a producer for an ad agency that your mom would work for?
He was actually independent contractor, from what I remember. He was, independent contractor, songwriter, arranger, and ad agencies would hire him to write the jingles.
Okay.
And then he would hire my mom and her sisters, my aunts.
Gotcha. What kind of music did you listen to when you were growing up?
Man, when I grew up, I listened to everything. I listened to rock, pop, jazz, not too much. Not orchestral, like not a lot of stuff like that, but just mainly pop, jazz, rock, heavy rock. One of the first albums that I ever bought on my own was Heart's album, Dreamboat Annie. So all that kind of stuff, Van Halen, everything.
So you had a pretty diverse background in music.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Which I love. I look back on that and I love the fact that I had a diverse toolbox, because what I think now is listening to all of those different styles of music, I feel like I developed a great toolbox of audio colors,
Mm.
and those things go into all of my production now.
You saw these producers out there and you realized that that was kind of like the path. Is that what you're saying? Instead of, being the guitarist or being the drummer, you saw the production as your path?
Yeah, 100%. Because I felt like, if I wanted to be a musician, I mean, I saw that the life of a musician is pretty hard, and you have to be really special to
Mm.
cut through the amount of musicians that there are out there. And I just realized that I was good, but I wasn't that good. And I just decided, it's like, well,
Mm.
wait a second. I know that I have the patience to sit back and be in the background and carve out something. I can sit here and carve out a record and until I feel like it's
Mm.
right.
And perfect it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Gotcha. So what happened after that, after you kind of made that decision?
After making the decision to go into production, I spent many, many, many years. Well, at the same time as I was like developing as a producer, nothing, obviously I wasn't making money. So what I had to do was take on like little jobs. My first job before, before I started making money with music was working at McDonald's.
Mm.
So, I just developed this mindset of going, while I'm doing this whole music thing, I still have to do life. So went out, got a job at McDonald's, worked there for like 3 years, and then, as a crew member, and then actually went over into management for 3 years,
Hmm.
which was really dope because at the same time I was learning people skills there.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
always say like one of the best jobs one of the best first jobs somebody can have is working at McDonald's, because you learn so much, not just about cooking food, but you learn about, you learn the most important things, especially with what I do. And that's having people skills, knowing how to communicate with people, knowing how to, problem solve and all that stuff. And then the other thing is learning systems. Like, McDonald's, their whole thing is based off of a system. You make a burger, in LA the same way you would make it in Germany. So like
Mm-hmm.
that's an important thing. And that goes into, how I do records. I'm not saying it's a formula, but it's definitely a system to, knowing that we're going to do this all the time. And as long as we do this in these different ingredients, we should land on a successful product,
Hmm.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Is that something that you adopted kind of later in your career, or is that something that you brought, directly into music?
I definitely brought that into music, but it wasn't like, I mean, it took me a long time to come around and go, oh, wait a second, for the two mindsets to come together.
Mm.
Because, when you're young and you're trying to do music, it's like the wild, wild west. You're out there just trying to figure stuff out,
Yeah. And you were getting those little odd music jobs, just through your connections and the kind of the Chicago ad scene?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Because going backwards, so I was working at McDonald's when, as I was doing that, I was also working at a jingle company, which was my uncle's company in Chicago called Joy Art Music. So, when I had downtime, I would go down to his office, watch how he produced, watched how he wrote jingles. And then he eventually hired me, but I was making like $100 a week. So it wasn't like real money,
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for several years, and then ended up going back to McDonald's again, you know?
Do you remember any of the jingles that you were a part of?
Oh, absolutely. McDonald's, definitely McDonald's, Kraft Philadelphia cream cheese, Captain Crunch, stuff for General, what's the name of the company? General Mills,
Mm-hmm.
but all major commercials.
Yeah, that's interesting. You don't really hear, at least today, about people talking about writing jingles and being a part of that part of the music industry. It's very particular.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. I'm glad I had that experience, because that goes into, having gone through that experience gave me the ability to be what I call a sharpshooter at what it is we do. Every time I go in the studio, I'm not in there like vibing it out or waiting for inspiration to come. It's like, for what I do, it's like, man, we have a job to do. Let's get in here and do it.
hmm.
And going through the jingle scene, you definitely learn that you don't have time to sit in there. Time is money for sure. So you don't have time to be hanging out, waiting. Your whole thing is to figure out what it is you got to do in the studio, get in there, get it done so that the song or the spot can be on the air the next day or 3 days from now.
So what happened after that? You said, you're working through the 2000s and getting some experience with music and doing that, but not really making anything. So what happened in the latter half of that decade for you?
So for me, I was actually doing, let me go back. So in 1990, in 92, me and my cousins decided to, we had always grown up wanting to move to LA, the stereotypical dream, we'll move to LA, become big songwriters and music producers. So in 1992, me and my cousins and our whole company, we decided to move to LA, leave Chicago, go to LA. Get to LA. We're there for several years to, pursuing music. Nothing really happened musically. And after a while, I started to just get burnt out on the whole thing, chasing music, chasing artists, trying to develop artists, trying to write a hit record and all that stuff. That shit gets boring and tiring after a while. And I decided, I really felt a life change coming. And at that particular time in 96, once we were in LA, I felt a life change coming and met a guy in California who had invited me to his church, and went to his church. And just from that one visit at his church, I really felt like, I wanted to take a break from the chasing the music industry, the whole music scene, and really just go along that path of seeing what my life was, seeing what the spiritual side of my life was all about, learn about that, and to really, investigate and see if that was something that I was supposed to do with the rest of my life, meaning ministry,
Mm-hmm.
And as I was doing that, I really, at that point, that's when I learned, I went into music ministry. So what I did at that time, I was a children's worship leader. So I would, every Sunday, I was the guy that led the kids in the worship service. And, for me, that was extremely fulfilling because I realized that I had the best of both worlds at that particular time, what I was thinking, because I was doing music, I was using my musical ability, but I was also shaping other people's, especially kids, I was shaping the lives of children,
Mm-hmm.
their spiritual lives, and for me, that was and still is extremely fulfilling. So I ended up doing that for about, like 10 years to where all I focused on was that, I was working at a church in Eagle Rock, California, called Christian Assembly, and I had several opportunities to become full-time staff. And every time I would pray about becoming full-time staff, like that would be the way I'd make my money, I would always hear in my spirit and feel God go, "No, that isn't for you."
Mm-hmm.
And it was really confusing because I'm like, well, man, how am I supposed to make money doing what I'm doing because basically what I was doing was bartering. So I would do this ministry thing at the church on Sundays, and the church owned a bunch of houses, in the neighborhood. So in return for doing this service at the church with the kids, they let me live rent free, me and my family, in one of the houses. Right. So it was kind of like, all right, this is cool. But I'm still going, man, well, I need to make money. So we would pray about this. Me and my wife would pray about me becoming full-time staff at the church. And God would always go, that's not for you. So, we stayed faithful with what it was he had in front of us at that particular time. Fast forward to like 2005, my cousin Tricky Stewart, who had since moved to Atlanta, was him and his brother Mark Stewart, they were retooling their company, which is Red Zone Entertainment, and asked me if I would come down and kind of help them produce some stuff because they knew that, what I did as far as vocal production. And I went down to Atlanta, produced a record with Tricky, and really felt another life change coming. And, long story short, decided, talked to my wife about it, and we prayed about it and decided that, that it was cool for me to go ahead and start to pursue music again in the secular industry. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we go down to Atlanta. We're in 2005, 2006. I'm working with Tricky, and we start writing together and producing stuff. And that's when I really started getting into the mode of vocal production, because all I would do is Tricky would write records with other writers, but all I would do all day long is cut the vocals with the demo singer or with the writer, and then do all the rough mixes. So it basically taught me at that point how to get an artist in, produce their vocals, and make sure I was getting great stuff all at the same time, in a timely fashion. So that's how everything transformed from ministry into, back into the music game.
And how old were you when you went off to the church and the ministry for those years?
Ooh, I was 27 or 28.
Okay. And
Yeah.
your cousins that you moved to LA with were still kind of chasing the music industry there?
Yeah, they were still doing their thing. So once we got to LA, my cousins, they actually stayed only 3 or 4 years, and then they went down to Atlanta. That's when they moved down to Atlanta. And then I stayed in LA for the next 12, 13 years.
Right.
If not longer.
And they moved to to Atlanta kind of right when that whole Dirty South movement was coming about. And
yeah, yep.
So did they see that happening, or was it just kind of a lucky thing that they moved there at the right time?
I think it was a combination of both. I mean, they saw it happening, but, it was just a lucky thing. Well, and it was great because, not lucky, because Tricky's an amazing producer. He had connected with L.A. Reid, as far as I know of the story, he had connected with L.A. Reid. L.A. Reid brought him down to Atlanta, and he became a part of that whole movement, that whole scene.
So you moved there, and you're starting to really get your hands on vocal production and mastering that aspect of these records.
Yeah.
So what happened after that?
So after that, within that time, fast forward 2005, 2006, we go through a whole year of just that mode of it, writing. Tricky and his brother Mark, which are my cousins, worked out. They were showing me all the different guys in the game who did vocal production, and guys like who was it? It was the Underdogs, Harvey Mason Jr., all the hit Tank. They were like, listen to these guys. Like, these are the guys who are doing. They're the guys who are producing records that that feel right, like they're great records. And I just went on a study and binge of listening to their records. I'd listen to everything that Harvey Mason did, with his writing and production partner. In that time, Tricky started just going, man, we could, if we keep this up, we could actually do a nice run as far as like writing hits. And, we met about it every single day. We planned on, what do we do if we get a hit record, or what do we do to get a place where we're writing hit records? And we just carried on with that mentality for about a year. And then fast forward, like I think it was like the end of 2006 is when we wrote Umbrella for Rihanna.
So your group here was pretty self-assured that you could do this, and you have 3 different people that are all confident. When you were studying these records that they were giving you, what did you do for that? Were you just sitting in a room with headphones on and listening and taking notes?
Yeah, it was a lot of that. A lot of sitting by myself, listening to it, just listening to the records and seeing what kind of emotion was coming from it and what made it special. I remember one of the first demos I produced for Tricky when I came down to Atlanta. I cut all the vocals on this group that he was producing and spent like a week just comping it and chopping it up based off of what I was learning from these other guys. Spent like a week comping it. I didn't want him to hear it until I got done comping it, did the rough mix. And I was like, all right, man, you want to come in and hear this record? And he's like, yeah, let me check it out. Tricky came in the room. He listened to it and he goes, yeah, that's hot. Now make it a record. I was like, oh, wait a minute. And it stunned me because that was the day that I realized that there's a difference between a demo and a record. There's a difference between just going in, capturing information and slapping some plugins on it. There's a difference between that process and actually going in and creating a record.
How familiar were you with all the equipment?
So that was the other thing. I was not familiar at all because when I left the game, everything was still analog. So that was the last thing that I knew. So when I came back into the game, I actually had to, I was like, wait, what's Pro Tools? And I literally had to teach myself and go, well, wait a second. So you're telling me that we can capture music in that thing? How are we getting music into the computer? So it was a completely different thing that I had to learn and teach myself, and I jumped all the way in.
So let's get to the juicy part where you got, it's 2007. You guys have been talking about getting, or 2006 or 2007, talking about getting a hit, and you guys write Umbrella. So walk me through that.
It's crazy. I don't think I've ever told a lot of people this part of it, but so when they had turned me on to Harvey Mason, the Underdogs, I would go home, and as I would listen to their music, because they had their music on their website, right? And I would just literally listen to their music on their website and look at their picture. And Harvey would kill me if he heard this, but I would look at their pictures and I would look at their website and go, man, next year I'm going to be taking all of their work. And I know that's a crazy thing, but it was just one of those things where, that's how you pump yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at their website, and I remember we were Red Zone, we were actually shut down for the Christmas break. And I had just heard about the program Logic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because Trick was telling me, man, if you learn this thing, we can just keep going. We can go learn Logic. You can be my guy to engineer this stuff, and we'll just keep it going. I was like, all right, cool. So we were shut down for the Christmas break. I was like, I got up one morning, I was looking at their website, and I was like, man, nobody is at the studio. I'm going to go down to the studio, open up this and try to learn this Logic thing, and just learn it so I can have it. My thinking was so I'd have that knowledge when we got back up after the Christmas break, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I go down to the studio, crack open Logic, start going through loops, find the loop that is the beat of Umbrella, and I just start looping it and start trying to learn the plugins, what the plugins were all about. Shortly after that, Tricky comes to the studio and he's like, yo, what's that? I was like, nothing, I'm just messing around. And he goes, open up the gear. So we open up the gear. He starts doing music, he starts doing a bass line and all, just the music to it. And then shortly after that, Dream just shows up. And then Dream is like, what are y'all doing? We're like, nothing, we're just here. And Dream goes, open up the mic. He goes in the booth, starts singing the melody down from top to bottom. And I'm tracking him as he's putting the melody on, and we're all just kind of like, we're just doing what we do. And then he goes, all right, so take me back to the top. Then we go back to the top of the record, and he starts putting the lyrics to the melody that he laid down. And not long after that, Umbrella was a complete record.
Man, so it all just came together just like that.
Yeah. And the thing that I love about that process is that we, in that moment that the record was being created, what I learned from that and what I use to this day was that we went in with the intention of just doing what we do because we love doing what we do. Not we went in there and we were hunkered down for the next 12 to 24 hours until we came up with something. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, that's the main ingredient for me, for what I do. It's like, man, as long as we know that there's something we got to do, let's just go in and let it flow, as opposed to, I'm the one guy that I hate being in the studio for just like a ridiculous amount of hours. 'Cause I know that it doesn't take all that to create magic. If you get something that's lightning in a bottle, it'll flow.
As a growing artist or songwriter, keeping royalties coming in is important for keeping the bills paid. It's also important to keep an eye on those royalty payments. A lot of people we worked with here at Royalty Exchange were having a tough time making sense of the royalties that are getting paid. So we built a free tool called Know Your Worth that automatically analyzes every royalty payment made on your music. It breaks it all down in an easy-to-understand analysis with some insights that would be impossible to find elsewhere. Plus, it connects you with the thousands of investors on Royalty Exchange and allows them to make you offers on your music. So far, musicians have raised over $1 million for new projects, new ventures, and a whole lot of other things just through the Know Your Worth app. If you're earning royalties, you should be keeping track of them, and Know Your Worth makes it easy. It only takes about 3 minutes to connect an account, and the tool will automatically update over time. Just visit worth.royaltyexchange.com or find the link in the show notes to get started. Now, let's get back to the interview. And for you, that's just going in there and setting your mind to it as opposed to just waiting around for something to happen?
Absolutely. I mean, because I think if you have something good, and I think I learned that from Tricky is he's the type of producer, like if you're not getting that feeling from it right from the rip, like don't even keep wasting time with it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what hit makers are able to do. They're able to go, well, this is a great idea, and they're honest with themselves and go, well, it's a great idea, but I can't see this becoming a smash.
Yeah.
So at that point, you just go, all right, let's pack that away and let's try something else, And if you get to a place to where it doesn't come, for me, I just don't like forcing through it. I just go, man, well, it's not here. Let's just wait on it. Let's wait for something special to come.
That makes sense. I'm sure it can be difficult for some people though to let something go if they're not sure. Or, I'm sure that's
absolutely
that's tough.
I mean, but what I've learned in that is that a lot of times we won't let stuff go because we're so, everybody wants a hit so bad because everybody's creating from the mindset of it only takes one record to change your life.
Mm-hmm.
So especially now, especially in this generation now, like everybody, if you get one record, that'll change your life. So everybody's just like, man, let's just get it. Let's just finish this one because this might be the one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, but that ain't the one. It's like, and most people don't want to let those go. So they'll just keep holding on to them and keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing until they get it finished. And then they get their heart broken when they play it for somebody and they go, no, that's not hot, So then they have to go back and work through that disappointment, clear their mindset, and to try to get to a place to where they can write something special.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. So you had this record that you guys produced, but it really wasn't anything in that time other than an MP3 or a WAV file. So what did you do with it from there?
So from there, Tricky, Mark, they just went into the mode of just A&R, because at that particular time, Tricky had gotten asked to work on Britney Spears' album that was about to come back. She was about to do another album, and they went into A&R mode. It was I think everybody involved was like Tricky and Mark and Jazzy Faye. There were a number of people who were responsible for sending it around to where it eventually landed with Karen Kwok, who worked for L.A. Reid at Def Jam, where Rihanna was signed.
Mm-hmm.
And they went into A&R mode. And for me, I was just a new guy in the industry who was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm just in the background doing what I do in the studio. And the next thing I know, Tricky and them are like, yo, L.A. Reid loves this record for this artist, Rihanna. And we're going to fly to LA and cut the vocals. And I was like, all right, cool. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know, Rihanna. I didn't know any of her staff, which are all great, great friends of mine now. So, next thing I know, we're flying out to LA. We cut the record. We finish it out. And then, the rest is history. The record comes out. It blows up, changes all of our lives. And that was it, And that was the thing that opened the door for everything else.
What did that feel like in the moment when it blew up and it was on the charts? And how did your day change? I guess is a good question to ask.
Man, it was surreal because for me, it was a couple of different things. It was surreal, but it was also really, really, really exciting because I had that whole mode that I went through when I was doing ministry. I was learning so much about just letting go, letting things go and just letting it happen, and me getting out of the way and allowing God to take the reins and let things and put me in the right place at the right time without me thinking that I had to orchestrate stuff and messing it all up. So for me, when Umbrella happened, that was a culmination of all of those years of me actually going. When I decided to go into ministry, I was just like, man, I don't care anymore. Like we've had so many artists that we've worked with. We've had so many false starts. I had so many artists that I worked with, so many false starts, and nothing jumped off and turned into that big record. And so at that point, I was just like, man, I'll do whatever I need to do right now just so that I can stay peaceful and do music and love music as I'm doing it. So when Umbrella happened, that was, for me, that was a result of me stepping out of the way and letting God maneuver things to put me in the right place at the right time with the right people and the right situation, and success happened and opened up doors.
What was it like knowing that, you had this super personal touch on that record of engineering the voice and making it perfect? And then, there's millions or maybe billions of people that are listening to it around the world. Like is there like a sense of pride that's you listen to it on the radio, probably even still today, I'm sure they play it every once in a while. It's like, well, that's me. I made that, I made her voice sound that way. Or
Absolutely. No, it's definitely a sense of pride, but I'd have to say it like this. It's a thing of a spiritual and a faith journey pride for me, because I've had several times where, just looking at the whole story, I've had a lot of times where God had to just reassure me at in this process and after the process. He's like, listen, if you hadn't woke up that morning, just think about it. If you hadn't woke up that morning, that record never would have been created. Because it started out of just going, oh, I'm going to go down to the studio and learn Logic. You know what I mean? So when you have a revelation like that, it's extremely humbling, and it's extremely, it's humbling, and it just really continues to set the course for, wait a second, we made a record that changed how records are done. It was like one of the biggest records of the decade, if that's the right way to say it. But it was created, it came together just out of a seed. So for me, I go, when I look at it, that's the thing that God says to me. It's like, man, that a record that changed so many people's lives, all these people that were part of making that record and promoting that record and who benefited from that record, it was born out of a seed that I planted in you to just get up and go learn a program. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I'm like, for me, I'm like, whoa, that's insane.
That realization.
Yeah.
So how did your professional life change after that? I'm sure it was, everyone kind of knew who was on this record. So how did it change?
It opened the doors for everything. I think that was the thing that, people started to notice a difference in. So every time Tricky and Dream would get hired to write for a project, Tricky would be like, this is my vocal producer, he's going to cut the vocals. And we would cut, after Umbrella, I'd cut the artist record like Mary J. Blige, and the artist would kind of go, well, man, wait a second, how come I don't sound like this on the other records? And Trick would go, because he didn't cut them, And then consequently, they would come to me and they go, well, listen, would you mind cutting a couple more records on me and possibly go back and recut some of the other ones so that there'd be continuity? And I was like, absolutely. So in that, that became the cycle for a long time of just, going back, recutting vocals on different artists, and which all started with Rihanna on Umbrella. And then my first Grammy came from when I did that for Mary J. Blige. So that just opened up the door, and people were going, well, wait a second, all of these people are, and, Tricky and them were writing hits, with these records. So it was just like a snowball thing. People were going, well, all right, we want Tricky and Dream, and we definitely want that dude to cut those vocals.
Yeah, you guys were just on a roll, right?
Yeah, exactly.
After that, it's like you say, everyone was kind of coming to you, and is that where your network? People talk about networks stay in the music industry because they're so crucial. Is that where it really started to blossom from there? Is like you meet one person and they say, well, you should also do the vocals on this person's album, and you work from there?
Absolutely. That's it. Yeah. And it's because people ask me all the time, it's like, well, man, how do you get all your work? And I go, it's word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
It's first and foremost the experience that the artists have with me, and, and their management, and it's what we capture when we're in the studio. And then it's all word of mouth. Like I don't go out, I don't promote or anything like that. I just make sure that, from that standpoint, I just make sure that I handle my business and that I come in and do what I'm hired to do with very little drama. And, when a lot of times some artists and managers laugh at me because I'll come into a situation, they go, man, what do you think of this record? Do you like this record? And I go, you didn't hire me to come in and A&R the record, even though I have an opinion, but you didn't hire me to come in and A&R the record. You came in and asked me to cut a record. So I want to do that, and I think that's a thing that a lot of up and coming producers really need to learn is don't be a jack of all trades. Become an expert at the one thing that you feel like you're gifted to do.
That's something I wanted to talk to you about, because you are a vocal producer, and like if you look at all the tracks that you're on, that's what your title is.
Right.
And a lot of people coming up today in the industry, maybe it's because they have to be everything. They have to be their vocal producer, their engineer. They do everything because that's how you make it. But how would you tell them to kind of specialize in what they think is best? Try everything and then maybe figure out something, or how would you recommend?
I love how you say that. Try everything, like out of necessity, if that's what you have to do. If because I engineer for my sessions, but I'm not trying to mix the record. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So try everything. If it's out of necessity, do what you have to do, but eventually get to a place to where you specialize in something so that people call you for that thing. Because I can't focus on getting a great vocal performance out of an artist if I'm thinking about mixing the album too.
Right.
Like it's just not possible. Like you can do it, and people do it. You get lucky, but I just know for me, I want to be an expert, and people and I've carved out that niche of being considered an expert, and it lines up because people call me not just to cut records for the album, but people call me if they've got the first single that they know they don't have time to experiment with somebody that doesn't have experience in producing a vocal.
Mm-hmm. They don't just need a vocal producer. They need you.
They want a specialist. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be considered a specialist, be a specialist in that one thing. People call you. It's like they go, oh, this is the biggest single. This is going to be the biggest single. Mm-hmm. Who do we call? Call Kuk Harrell. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that's humbling. That's insane. And I'd much rather have that than somebody go, well, can you come and engineer this thing? It's like, yeah, I'm an engineer, but I know 14 different engineers that are way better than me who actually do that engineering shit. I can edit, I can make sure everything feels great and sound great, but they'll take it a lot further than I will as an engineer. And I think that just comes with being honest to yourself. That goes back to when I realized that I wasn't a great drummer. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't be a world-renowned drummer or guitarist. Mm-hmm.
But you tried it.
I tried it, and I was honest with myself and go, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that because I want to be the best. I want to be the absolute best at what it is I do. And I love it, and even just us talking about it right now really solidifies it in me because, I'm still blown away when I walk into rooms and people go, yo, this dude he's the best, or to see a magazine cover and somebody saying that, the world's first most successful vocal producer. Like that's insane. That's humbling to me.
Yeah. But that's the brand that you built for yourself.
Absolutely. 100%.
What do you think people that are just getting started today or trying to get their first hit really need to focus on?
Man, I would say just being organic. I was speaking to some writers about a week ago, and they were telling me about their writing process, and that they were writing based on they weren't writing based on emotion of a record. They weren't writing musically. They were writing it's like mathematically, or based on algorithms and all that kind of shit. I was like, that's not music. You know what I'm saying? Yes, we can have hits based on based on like moving stuff around and editing, doing tricky edits. But at the end of the day, a great song is a great song. You will never, ever be able to get beyond a great melody with a great concept. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's like the old theory that, with Quincy Jones, I don't care, man. I don't care how advanced we get with technology. If you can play something with one finger on a piano, a melody that people will remember, you've done your job. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be, because I used Ableton, or because I used Fruity Loops, or because I used Logic. You still got to write a song with that shit. My advice is to, focus on the song, figure out what makes a hit song and follow that pattern. You need a great melody, you need a great verse, you need a great B section, you need a monster hook. A lot of writers that I come across, today, they write, up and coming writers, they come strong out the chute with a great intro, a great hook, or a great verse. But when they get to that hook, it was like they just decided, oh, this is good enough. It's like, no.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, when it gets to the hook, that shit's gotta explode.
Yeah, you gotta have all the pieces there.
Yeah.
How has your approach to vocal producing changed over those years as you've worked with Rihanna and Mary J. Blige and all these great voices of the last decade? How's your approach to vocal producing changed?
It hasn't changed at all, because when I realize what it is I do, I just stick to that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It really hasn't. I know that sounds boring, but because for me, a lot of it is mental preparation. I go in, I have to be mentally prepared, because a lot of times when I cut records, I've never heard them before. People call me and go, yo, can you come and cut this record? This is our first single. It's coming out next week. And can we send you an MP3? I was like, yeah, send it to me. But I haven't had a chance to like really sit and take it apart. But what I focus on more than anything, as long as I stay in a place to where I'm ready to just be flexible with that artist, feel them out, see how they want to cut the record, see what kind of mood they're in, and focus solely on, of course, we're going to get the lyrics right. And of course, we're going to get the melody and all that stuff right. But mostly I want to get the emotion out of the artist. And that's the difference maker with me. I learned that early. And, so like when we did Umbrella, I definitely had to sit back and look at it, and did other records after that. I had to look at it, and Tricky would go, this is what's special about this, and having a great mentor, which is what he was for me, like a music mentor, just going, this is what makes a great melody. This is what makes a great passionate performance. Listening to all the nuances, the breaths and the cry and all that kind of stuff in the vocal. Once I learned that stuff early on, I was like, that's it. You don't change, because that's what makes Kuk Harrell's vocal production, Kuk Harrell's vocal production.
And that's why you tend to work with the same artists over and over again, because not only do you know them and they know you, but because you feel really familiar with how to best produce them.
Yeah, but it's not even. I mean, I work with a ton of artists, so I think yeah, at that point it just becomes, I know how to produce them, but it's also just being, they feel comfortable. It's like I say this all the time. It's all about the experience as well.
Hmm.
Letting the artist be who the artist is, and it depends on what kind of record you're doing. But I'm just not the type of producer that pushes an artist to sound like Kuk Harrell, or produces an artist to be what I want them to be. I want them to be who they are, and we take both of our gifts and both of our specialties and bring them together to create something that people have never heard before.
So you're not trying to steer them in your way, but just kind of find their own voice, I guess.
Absolutely, because what's really critical is that the magic is already in the record. Like when we hear the demo, the magic is in the demo. So for me, that's the biggest thing that I'm doing, is making sure we maintain the magic that's in that demo of the record that we're cutting.
Mm-hmm.
And without the artist feeling like I'm trying to make them sound like another singer, or change their sound. Like my thing is, let's do you, but we gotta capture it like this, like where she or he put that breath in the demo, or where she or he took that break right there. We got to catch that exact same break.
And that's pretty difficult to find sometimes, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Because you have to remember, a lot of times people are getting in. A lot of times when people, especially up and coming producers, when they get in the studio, they're going off of, I got to get a hit. I got to get a hit because I got to do this and I got to pay this. And, they're thinking in the back of their mind, they're thinking that they got a lot of responsibility and they're trying to get that big break.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, they're operating out of that. But you have to be able to separate all that stuff from what it is you do when you go in the studio. You got to be able to go, all right, yes, regular life is going on outside of here, but I'm not even thinking about that. I just want to be here in this lab and let creativity flow. And prayerfully, what we create in here will create a financial blessing for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, how do you be organic, though, I think is the question, because I think it's absolutely the right advice artistically, is you need to be in there and just let things flow.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you've ran across times where you can't do that, or there's the music equivalent of writer's block, where it's like nothing's coming up. So what are some of the techniques that you use to kind of get past that?
Well, I mean, for writer's block, if you can afford to, just wait on it. Don't try to force it, but keep studying and trying to find out what's hot. So that's the first thing. The second thing for me as a producer, would you say, how do I stay organic with it?
Yeah. Like, how do you let things come to you organically and let them flow, as you say?
Man, it's disconnecting from the mindset of, I gotta make money. That's the biggest thing. That's the hardest thing to do, because you go in and you're like, no, man, we gotta kaboom boom, because I got this and I got this, I got responsibility. It's like, and then a lot of times it's like, no, I gotta prove a point, all that stuff. And all that stuff for me just clouds my mind. It's like, I don't want to think about that stuff. Creativity is a thing. It doesn't come out of just thinking about what all the stuff that you're responsible for. It comes out of just being at a place to where, creative energy flows through you, and you're able to capture that. And then now you take your crafts and your skills to put it all together. And now we get technical. But as far as like getting that creative spark, you gotta be a clean slate.
You just got to leave it at the door when you come in the studio.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure that can be tough to do, but once you master it, I guess is where you really become a professional.
Right.
This might be an odd question, but if you had to kind of go back to Kuk Harrell back in the early days, do you know anything now, piece of advice that you'd give him back then?
Yeah, I would say something that I learned that I wish I had learned earlier is to just let it ride, man. Let life ride. Let it happen. Get out of the way. So this is it's a weird thing. I hope this doesn't sound crazy. It's cool that I discovered it later and I accept that, and I wouldn't change that for anything. but I wish I had learned it earlier to save myself a lot of stress, to just go, man, just become great. Let me study, be great at it, at what it is I do, but let me get out of the way. And when I say get out of the way, I mean that just in an emotional sense. I definitely mean that in a spiritual sense, to just get out of the way and let things happen. Like, let life happen. Don't feel like we have to control. Don't feel like you have to control everything, because what I learned in my experience is that the more I try to control things and make things happen, the more I will mess up, and it becomes the more things that I have to clean up later on when that organic thing actually happens.
That's great. That's great.
And I teach that, like, all the engineers and producers that I mentor and take under my wing. That's the first thing that I tell them. I'm like, just relax. Tricky used to tell me all the time, because I was that way at first. I was like, man, I can't wait till we boom, boom, boom. I can't wait till we write. And he would just say, it's going to happen. We're going to do it. All we have to do is just be great at what we do, and it'll happen. And once it happens, people will keep calling. They will keep calling, and you will keep working. And, and I was like, okay. And I definitely took that approach to heart, and it happened. I got out of the way. It happened. So that's the thing that I pass on to people all the time. It's like, we get, especially now, we get all twisted up. We think that we got to have a whole bunch of followers, and everybody's got to know every single thing that we worked on. And, it's not creating hype. That's my thing. It's like, listen, be honest. Like, if you worked on a record and all you did was engineer, that's the only credit you need to put on there. Don't post, I say this to my team all the time. Don't just post saying that you did something when you really didn't do it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so don't make it a show. Just do what you do, be great at it, and everything else will come. Like, the work will come. Your profile will increase, but people will be coming to you for what it is you do.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people should really take to heart these days, especially.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else that you want to talk about?
One other thing, I'm really excited about a new venture I just started with my daughter, who's been working with me for several years, because I've been mentoring engineers and now taking on and training vocal producers to be great, and basically duplicating myself, because I get so many calls. I can't be in every room everywhere. So I've just decided to take vocal engineers and vocal tuners and vocal producers under my wing and start this new venture called Core Management, to where I'm imparting to all of them one core thing, and that is the importance of being a people person when you go in the studio with these artists. It's not all about how great you are at, just all the technical stuff, but it's making sure that people feel comfortable with you and trust you and continue to call you. So, that's the thing. It's called Core EMT Management, and I'm excited about that.
Bringing those McDonald's skills into the music industry.
100%.
Well, it's been excellent talking to you and hearing your story.
Oh man,
it's
thank you so much.
It's a fascinating one, and to hear how you got there is awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You can follow Kuk Harrell on Instagram and Twitter to keep up with what he's working on currently. He has a few interesting projects in the works right now that we couldn't tell you about on the show, but he definitely will be releasing some stuff in the future. If you enjoyed listening to his story, feel free to share it around to some friends. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, and we'll see you then.